After marking first year in office, President Yoon Suk Yeol continues to take part in diplomatic exchanges, including meetings with the leaders of the U.S. and Japan, followed by summits with Germany and the European Union. For this edition of Weekly Focus, we have our foreign affairs correspondent Bae Eun-ji to guide us through the key events this week. Welcome, Eunji.
Thanks for having me.
So as we just saw, our Kim Do-yeon reported on the 60th anniversary of diplomatic ties between South Korea and Canada. Now, what other key events can we look back on, Eunji?
On Tuesday, President Yoon also sat down for talks with Ukrainian First Lady Olena Zelenska, who visited Seoul as an envoy for Kyiv. She requested more non-lethal aid from Seoul, while President Yoon offered sympathy for the war-torn nation. Yoon also vowed to actively support Ukraine through close cooperation with NATO countries and the international community.
Right, celebrating the 60th anniversary of diplomatic ties with Canada by sitting down with Prime Minister Trudeau and also meeting with the Ukrainian envoy, Ms. Zelenska, right? Now, for details on that, let's turn to our top office correspondent, Oh Soo-young, for more.
Sure, let's take a look.
President Yoon Suk Yeol has expressed South Korea's solidarity and continued support for the people of Ukraine in his meeting with Ukrainian First Lady Olena Zelenska, who has requested more non-lethal aid from Seoul. Presidential spokesperson Lee Do-yeon told reporters that the South Korean leader and his wife Kim Do-yeon on Tuesday met with Zelenska, who is currently in the country as a special envoy for her husband Volodymyr Zelensky. During their meeting, Yoon conveyed the South Korean public and government's sympathy for Ukrainians and the families of those afflicted in Russia's invasion of their country.
무고한 인명, 특히 여성과 아동의 끔찍한 피해를 불러오는 그런 무력 사용 등 비인도적 행위는 어떤 상황에서도 용납될 수 없습니다.
The president also commended Zelenska's prominent role on raising global awareness and support for her war-torn country. According to spokesperson Lee, the Ukrainian envoy did not request lethal weapons from Seoul. Expressing Kyiv's gratitude for South Korea's solidarity and humanitarian aid, she requested more non-lethal military equipment, including those for mine detection and removal and rescue vehicles. She further asked that many South Korean firms participate in Ukraine's reconstruction efforts. Yoon replied that Seoul will actively support Ukraine through close cooperation with NATO countries and the international community. Over the nearly 15 months of war in Ukraine, Seoul has maintained a policy of providing non-lethal aid to Kyiv. But President Yoon told US media last month that he may have to reconsider Seoul's mode of support if Russia commits large-scale crimes against civilians or other violations of international law of war. In a Yurop연합 interview published Tuesday, the Ukrainian First Lady said Yoon's words were wise and she was grateful for his understanding. She also thanked Koreans for setting a good example and encouraging Ukrainians, deeming South Korea a model for recovery and growth. Zelenska further expressed willingness to invite President Yoon and First Lady Kim to Ukraine, saying the country is always waiting for its friends, though Yoon's office later said a formal invitation wasn't made. The top office says First Lady Kim also greeted Zelenska in a separate welcoming session, noting her Ukrainian counterpart's campaigns for children's education and mental health support during war, and reflecting on how South Korea, also as a nation afflicted by invasion in modern history, deeply emphasizes with the people of Ukraine. Oh Soo-young, Arirang
Now, President Yoon Suk Yeol is in the Japanese city of Hiroshima at the moment to take part in the Hiroshima G7 summit. Now, what is he up to there?
All right, President Yoon is taking part in the summit as a leader of an invited country, making him the fourth South Korean leader to attend a G7 summit. There, he's set to speak at an expanded session of the multilateral forum. On the sidelines of the event, a trilateral summit between South Korea, US, and Japan is expected to take place for the first time in 6 months. Yoon will likely sit down for talks with US President Joe Biden and Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida on Sunday. Also on Sunday, he'll be holding a separate bilateral meeting with Kishida. Together, they'll visit a memorial dedicated to victims of the 1945 atomic bombing of Hiroshima, where the monument in memory of the Korean victims is located. They'll pay tribute as agreed upon during their summit 2 weeks ago. Seoul's presidential office explained that this will be the first time the two countries' leaders will have visited the memorial together, and that no South Korean president has visited this memorial before. Since taking office in May, the Yoon administration has been especially focused on strengthening relations with Washington and Tokyo. The last time Yoon and Biden met was just 3 weeks ago, when Yoon made a state visit to the U.S. last month. And it's been only 2 weeks since Yoon and Kishida met after holding a bilateral summit in Seoul earlier this month.
Right, what an eventful May for Seoul and Tokyo.
That's right.
And that's not it. When President Yoon Suk Yeol comes back to Seoul on Sunday, he is scheduled to sit down for a summit with Germany and the European Union, right?
That's right. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz will visit South Korea on Sunday for a summit with President Yoon after attending the G7 summit in Japan. This is the first time in 13 years for a German leader to visit South Korea. Marking the 140th anniversary of the two countries' diplomatic relations, the two leaders will likely discuss ways to strengthen ties in fields, including supply chains and security issues on the Korean peninsula. Before the summit, Scholz will visit the demilitarized zone that separates the two Koreas. This year also marks the 60th anniversary of diplomatic relations between South Korea and the EU. The European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen and the European Council President Charles Michel will visit Seoul after taking part in the G7 summit. They're expected to discuss ways to boost cooperation on a wide range of issues like security, climate change, trade, and the war in Ukraine. It will mark President Yoon's first talks with EU leaders since he took office last May.
Right, it was a whirlwind week of diplomacy and more to come over the weekend.
That's right. President Yoon really seems to be focusing on diplomacy starting off his second year in office.
Right. Let's keep an eye on that. Thank you for the wrap-up, Eunji.
My pleasure.